Wall Street attorney Jason Bond is sentenced to life without parole.
Jason Bond's fall from the top is swift and violent.
Jason was living the life and everything that he had set himself out to do.
He's very, very dangerous, especially when he's crossed.
He brutally beats and murders his girlfriend.
I've probably hit 1,000 people in my life.
So like right now you could get angry with me and feel like hitting me.
I could.
Bond claims he blacked out that night. But is he just hiding his guilt behind his rage? I'm Dr. Michelle Ward, and I'm a criminal psychologist and trial consultant. I've researched hundreds of murder cases, determined to find out what drives people to kill. But no amount of research beats meeting a killer face to face. Using techniques I've honed through my career, I'm going to take you inside the mind of a murderer. When Danielle Thomas met Jason Bond in 2011, the future couldn't have looked brighter.
Danielle Thomas was a beautiful young lady, brilliant young lady. Go for it. Danielle reminded me of the kind of young lady when she was young. She brought home all the hurt animals and lost birds and things like that. She had that kind of way about her. She was a good soul.
She grew up in a tight-knit Christian family in which she learned to value the possibility of redemption.
She embraced her faith and she embraced life. Danielle's attitude to me was, you can forgive.
After graduating from college, Danielle got her MBA and was working as a financial analyst at a Florida theme park.
She was highly motivated. She was ambitious. She wanted to succeed.
He was a bright Wall Street lawyer, and she was a successful executive.
Their relationship progressed very rapidly. They went from dating to living with each other within a few months. She decided to pick up stakes from Florida where she lived and move to New York City to live with Jason.
Yeah, do you want to come down?
Danielle probably thought when she met Jason that she had met her Prince Charming.
When the love affair began, Danielle had no way of knowing that her prince would turn into a violent killer, and her fairy tale romance would have a tragic ending. On June 24th, 2012, Jason strangled and stomped her to death, and later was sentenced to life in prison. I'm on my way to Dannemore, New York, to the Clinton Correctional Facility to meet with Jason Bond. It's his first on-camera interview since conviction, and I've been given 2 hours to talk with him, which is more than most prisons allow. What sets Jason apart from most criminals I encounter is his education. From my research, I know that he graduated from Columbia University before working on Wall Street, and his mother is a wealthy and powerful New York executive. My goal is to find out how a man who seemed to have it all turned into a killer. Jason Bond, now known as inmate number 14A1771, has been behind bars for nearly 3 years. He's still able to appeal his case, and perhaps he's hoping that this interview will be beneficial to the outcome. He and I share the same number of advanced degrees, and we both understand the law, so I think this interview is going to play out like a chess match. And I'm prepared to make strategic moves if he tries to mess with me.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Dr. Michelle Ward.
Nice to meet you, Jason Bond.
It's Rusty. First, before we begin, would you mind signing the release? My first reaction is that his gaze is intense. His eyes are cold and detached. It makes me wonder what he's thinking. The small room is bristling with tension as we size each other up. How did you do this?
Our doctor said there was something wrong with me. The prosecution's doctor said there was something wrong with me. The doctor here is saying there's something wrong with me. I mean, I'm starting to believe that there's probably something wrong with me.
Is that an excuse? I'm not here to listen to any excuses. I want to get inside his head and see if I can find out where he took a wrong turn. And that always means starting at the beginning. And I want to ask you just some basic questions about your childhood.
Well, I grew up in the Bronx. It was chaotic. My mother kicked my father out when I was probably 2 or 3 years old. And he was also abusive, and he would become violent.
Jason tells me that his mother became obsessed with her career. That's where it made again. And gradually withdrew from his and his younger brother's lives.
I've gone through this with you many times.
And by 1988, when Jason was 9 years old, his mother sent them to Miami to live with their father.
Yeah, she said that her boyfriend didn't want any responsibilities that weren't his, and that once things settled down, you know, she was going to try to get us back.
How did that feel?
I was hurt, although I idolized my mother.
I already see that Jason's got some very specific risk factors for violence. He's inherited genes from a hot-headed, aggressive dad and a distant and unaffectionate mother. Plus, he lives in an abusive environment. It's called dual inheritance, the combination of traits fostered by nature and nurture. After moving in with his dad, Jason says things got out of control. According to social service records, Jason accused his father of frequent drug use.
My father had a cocaine and crack problem.
Was your father physically violent with you and your brother?
Yeah, very violent. My father has stabbed me in my knee.
How did you feel about your father?
I hated him.
Jason may seem like he's making these stories up as a way to get sympathy, but I checked, and there's a record of this incident with social services. Though many people suffer physical abuse as children, very few end up committing murder as adults, so there must be something else at play. And it doesn't excuse his violent actions in any way. In 1992, Jason returned to New York. He wanted to move back in with his mother, but he says her career was on the rise and she didn't want a troubled teenage boy around. Instead, she put him in an apartment with his grandmother, who couldn't control him.
So then my grandmother leaves, and my mother leaves me in the apartment by myself.
At 14?
No, at like 13. The neighbors are watching me come in with groups of older, darker kids. So they're calling the Child Protective Services, and my mother finds out, and her and my stepfather come to the apartment. She beat me up.
Your mother beat you up.
She was contacted at her job, so she was very upset about that.
I can't be sure Jason is telling the entire truth about this event, but court authorities did report he sustained bumps, scratches, and bruises from an assault by his mother.
Some of the neighbors saw what happened. They called the police.
Police, open up. Jason's mother was charged with neglect and abuse and ended up pleading guilty. His mother wanted nothing to do with him and in fact explicitly said that her career was more important than her son.
Without admitting any specific allegations, she pleaded guilty to child neglect. While I don't know enough about Jason's mom and I can't diagnose her, she does seem to have some traits often found in psychopaths. One of the big hallmarks of psychopathy is the tendency to go after their goals with absolutely no regard to damage it does to other people. In 1993, with neither parent willing to take care of him, 14-year-old Jason was placed in New York's foster care system and lived in a number of group homes over the next several years. Jason says that at first he was picked on and beaten up a lot, but soon he started to fight back.
I didn't want to be there. I would go AWOL all the time. I started to become more of an aggressor than the victim. I wasn't being bullied anymore. I was the bully. I was determined to do whatever it took to get kicked out of the facility.
He was a consistent pot user. He got into fights. He was violent in the home. I believe at one point he got in trouble at school for carrying a weapon.
Would you categorize yourself as a violent teenager?
I would say over time I became violent, yes. I would have outbursts
How did you feel physically when you would assault somebody?
Sometimes I would shake, cry, foam from the mouth. Sometimes I would feel like I was watching it over there.
Jason's describing severe physical reactions that accompany his rage. When he says he foams at the mouth, it's like he's a rabid animal, unable to control himself or process rational thoughts. Do you know these are going to happen before they happen? Is it something that's under your skin?
No,
Or
it will just happen. It's just like that.
This description of these uncontrollable outbursts serves his defense, so I have to be wary. I can't be sure he's not malingering or creating symptoms of a mental disorder as a way to get off the hook for his crime. At the same time, there are plenty of documented episodes of Jason assaulting others, so it does sound like there's a short circuit in his brain. Despite the abusive upbringing he describes and the violent outbursts he claims he experienced, Jason tells me he decided to turn his life around completely. You managed to go from no family, no education, to attend Columbia University. That is a triumphant story. And how did this happen?
It isn't something that happened overnight. I lived on my own, worked as a waiter. Then I met somebody who functioned as a mentor and who had gone through a similar childhood and was able to overcome that. And I went to community college. I graduated second in my class, and Columbia gave me a scholarship.
After Jason got his master's in international affairs from Columbia, he graduated from the University of Florida Law School. In 2010, he went to work on Wall Street.
He was just like so many other Ivy League educated men and women who were living in Manhattan and working as high-powered attorneys.
It's incredibly rare for someone with Jason's background to achieve such success. Even though he has so many risk factors for violence, he has one powerful asset: his intelligence. And that likely gave him the drive and focus to keep his explosive outbursts in check in school and at work.
I was always very sensitive and very intense. I think other people have described me as intense.
I'm going to describe you as intense.
Yeah, so that intensity could be channeled, and it could work to my benefit. I could be very productive, and I could function on less sleep and stay focused, and I would do anything.
But I know that the violent tendencies from his youth won't simply disappear without lots of intervention. He was able to suppress them for a while, but inside he is still both Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Jason presented two faces to the world. There was his public face, and then there was his private face. And that face was a horrifying face.
I'm trying to figure out how Jason Vaughn went from Ivy League grad and successful Wall Street lawyer to a brutal killer in one terrible night. He seems to have two sides to his personality. One Jason is rage-filled and violent. The other is cool and controlled. By the fall of 2011, he had worked his way up as a contract attorney for several top Wall Street firms, including Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan.
Jason had achieved a total transformation. He went from a street kid living by his wits to a corporate attorney in the boardroom.
Ironically, Jason tells me that around this time, his mother found out about his success and got in touch with him out of the blue.
No, my mom came back into my life.
Oh, how convenient.
Yeah. She didn't believe me at first. She thought I was lying.
I learned that his mother was now helping to run a major publishing company and earning a 7-figure salary. Did you forgive her?
Yeah,
Why did you accept her back into your life?
because I loved her.
Still,
Yeah.
Jason claims he has no rage and resentment against his mother. I find that hard to believe. Jason knows this interview will be broadcast, and his mom could see it. He must know that telling me what she did to him as a child may damage her corporate image. 1 year into his new career, Jason's life got even better when he met 26-year-old Danielle Thomas on a trip to Florida. Oh, closer. All right. Back. What attracted you to Danielle?
Just her carefree attitude. She was very adventurous, fun-loving.
Was it love at first sight?
Yeah, I think so.
Within a few months, they were even talking marriage. And in March of 2012, just 5 months into their relationship, Danielle moved into an apartment with Jason in Astoria, Queens, along with her beloved dog Schnoozer. She got a job as an executive at a weight loss company.
Oh, this is nice. You like it?
When did you guys start having problems? Because at one point it started to come apart a bit.
I started catching her in lies, and I started becoming more insecure.
What kind of lies did you catch Danielle telling?
Lies about her past, about ex-boyfriends, and then she would lie about stupid stuff that she didn't need to lie about, but that just reinforced my view that she was a liar.
How did you know she was lying?
Because I'm good at, I asked the same question 5 different ways. I'm a lawyer.
His smug laugh tells me he's proud of himself for manipulating her. But his actions are the product of deep-rooted insecurity. He's terrified of abandonment, so he's hypersensitive to any sign of disloyalty, real or imagined.
He was extremely, obsessively jealous over her talking with any man.
Very nice to see you, actually.
He was obsessive in tracking her movements, tracking her emails. There was no indication that we could find that Danielle had ever been in any way, shape, or form unfaithful to him. It was all in his head.
Jason tried to keep his jealous temper under control, but soon he started to unravel.
You go behind my back and talking to this guy, just admit it.
I'm not playing my games with you. I'm telling you the truth. I did not call him.
The first time you strike Danielle, what did that feel like?
It felt very bad. We got into an argument about something, and I left. And I'm walking in the parking lot trying to get away from her. She's following me, and she grabs my hand, and I smack her in the face. And then immediately, I was just stunned that had happened, and I ran away.
Did you guys break up at that point?
No. We were just gonna move forward, and then everything was good again for a while.
I'm sure that one of the qualities that attracted Jason to Danielle in the first place was her kind and forgiving nature. She loved Jason, so she didn't see this slap as the red flag that it was. During my case research, I found out that striking women was a pattern for Jason. You hit your other girlfriends.
There were other incidents, many other incidents. I'm talking about Jasmine, Genesee. I've probably hit 1,000 people in my life.
So like right now you could get angry with me and feel like hitting me.
I could. Try not to anyway.
I don't want to antagonize Jason too much. He's not handcuffed and he's only 2 feet away from me. This man killed his girlfriend. And he killed her in an incredibly violent fashion. He has impulse control problems, and I'm sitting there trying to rattle his cage. Jason admits that a few months after he struck Danielle, things got physical again. What changed in the relationship to make it so bad at that point?
Well, I had found out that she was still communicating with this ex-boyfriend.
So you strike her again?
Yeah.
2 neighbors called 911 after hearing the violent argument in Danielle and Jason's apartment.
There's an altercation going on next door to me where the guy seems to be forcefully holding the girl from leaving. I keep hearing my wall getting hit. She's crying.
He proceeded to beat her, punched her in the face, beat her about the body, and you can imagine how brutal it is because you had separate people calling 911.
I just hear a lot of thuds, and I feel like I can hear somebody screaming up there.
So far in my interview with convicted killer Jason Bond, I've learned that just 1 month before the murder, he attacked and beat Danielle so badly that 2 neighbors called the police. The Mr. Hyde part of Jason's personality was taking over, and his explosive outbursts were intensifying. Now I'm going to see if I can get him to own up to it. The report seeing her crawling down the corridor between the apartments, and then you come out. What happened?
I don't know.
Why was you crawling?
I don't know.
Do you remember any of it?
No.
Do you really not remember it?
I don't remember it. I mean, I remember what it felt like afterwards. It felt horrible. And I was crying, and I didn't want to be around her.
I don't believe that Jason doesn't remember any of this. It's just too easy. His memory conveniently stops at the beginning of the fight and returns when it's over. Blackouts during rage are not uncommon, but I would expect some flashes of recognition, especially because the assault went on for such a long time. Either way, Jason was very smart and well aware of his rage issues, so he should have removed himself from the situation before tensions grew even higher. Why didn't you separate from her at that point?
I tried. I contacted a number of friends and said I needed a place to stay. I was also afraid that I was going to lose her. And I said, listen, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go find a place. Doesn't mean I'm giving up on the relationship. She said, if we're going to make it work, you're not leaving. Because if you leave, then that's it. It's the end for us.
So even though you knew you could threaten her life, she is in danger being with you.
Well, I didn't think that I could kill her. That her life was on the line. Yeah, I didn't think it was that kind of situation.
Even after the abuse, Danielle still wouldn't give up on Jason and refused to press charges.
She loved him. No doubt about it.
Danielle knows that Jason could and has hurt her before, but she certainly doesn't believe he will kill her. Danielle thinks her love can save him. Sadly, this delusion is all too common in abusive relationships. However, just 2 weeks later, Danielle was terrified after Jason sent her a torrent of horrific text messages.
And he would not relent. And his text to her proceeded to get more and more violent. He threatened her with anal rape. And it was after that text that she finally said she had enough.
Still bruised from the beating 2 weeks earlier, Danielle hobbled into Detective Frawley's precinct with her dog. He remembers the meeting well.
Thomas reported that she was a victim of domestic violence at the hands of her boyfriend, Mr. Jason Bone. She had bruises, she had all types of injuries to back this up.
While she was there, Jason called her cell phone, and she put him on speaker right in front of the police.
I'll dedicate my life to hunting you down like a dog in the streets.
And the officer heard him say, "This is war? I will hunt you down like a dog?" This was proof positive that someone was going to get hurt before this was over.
Jason's in a rage against Danielle and wildly out of control, but instead of raving like a maniac in his call to her, he's coldly precise and articulate. It sounds like he's even enjoying the rage. Did you know she was with the police when you were calling and saying those things?
Yeah, no, I knew.
You knew the police could hear?
Yeah. I lost it. I didn't, this is not something that's premeditated. You think about the consequences.
The judge issued to Danielle a temporary order of protection.
Danielle briefly stayed elsewhere, but she refused to prosecute and moved back home with Jason. Was she staying out of fear?
No, I don't. No. You mean afraid that, like, if she left, I would...
You hunt her down like a dog in the streets?
No, I don't think that's why she was staying. She was very in love with me.
I don't think I'll ever forget this. She said to me, "Sir, I love Jason, and I want to save him. And with Jesus' help, I'm going to save him." And I said to her, "Well, if Jesus were here, I'm sure he'd want you to use your God-given common sense and stay away from him." And she said, "Well, thank you very much." Picked herself up, shook my hand, walked out the door forevermore. That's the last time I saw her alive.
My interview time with Jason Vaughn is running out, so I'm going to get tough on him to find out why he brutally beat and killed his girlfriend. I just learned that Danielle went back to him after he viciously attacked her. Things were calm for a few weeks, but then on June 23rd, 2012, it all fell apart. That night, they went to a party for a friend of Jason's named Suzanne. But around midnight, the evening took a toxic turn.
And we were doing a lot of drinking. And at some point, we got into an argument over a more recent communication between her and the ex-boyfriend.
I'm not calling him Jason.
You're a liar.
I'm not calling him. Can you please calm down?
Don't come home tonight.
Jason was furious and stormed off to his apartment. I learned that after Jason left, Danielle stayed at the bar with Suzanne.
She sees Danielle crying and totally distraught. Danielle then proceeds to tell his friend how Jason had been abusing her. It was only after she looked on the phone and saw some of the text messages that Danielle was receiving that she actually began to realize that this guy was a monster.
Do you have any friends you can stay with, family you can call, go to?
No. Suzanne tried to find Danielle a room for the night, but apparently she refused because she didn't want to leave her dog alone with Jason.
Give me a phone, I'll give you my number. You can call me anytime.
At 2:15 a.m., Danielle walked into the apartment. Still furious, Jason snatched her phone and saw a new number. He didn't recognize it as Suzanne's and immediately assumed that Danielle had been calling her ex-boyfriend.
And then the fight became real in earnest.
During the attack, Danielle managed to call 911 without Jason knowing.
911 operator for the emergency. 911.
The operator could hear the assault in progress. It was nothing short of horrific.
Hello, ma'am. Hello. Not this room.
You hear Jason raging in the background that he doesn't deserve this, he doesn't deserve this. Due to a shift change and a series of tragic miscommunications, police never responded to Danielle's call for help. The attack continued. At 3:20 a.m., 50 minutes after the 911 call, nobody knows exactly how it happened, but somehow a call went from Danielle's cell phone to Suzanne's voicemail.
Danielle's phone was activated and a voicemail was created and it recorded this attack.
The tape is very graphic, so we're just airing a small portion of it. He sounds very angry, but he sounds very controlled. Very controlled. He's very precise in his language.
He is mocking her, teasing her. She's pleading with him. Don't hurt me, don't hurt me. It was maniacal. It was macabre.
After nearly an hour of choking and beating her, Jason finally gave her an ultimatum. When Danielle answered, "I don't know," Jason kicked and beat her to death. When Jason finished with Danielle, she was a broken and battered and bloody mess. The autopsy report shows that Jason strangled Danielle, but that's not what killed her. She suffered severe blunt force trauma to her head and body and multiple rib fractures. In other words, she was stomped to death. But when I asked Jason to tell me what happened that night, he goes back to his favorite defense. How do you not remember?
I have no idea. I just don't remember any of it.
I don't believe you. Since he won't own up to anything, I'm going to walk him through the facts to see if I can get him to slip up. Your hands go from her wrists to her neck.
I think even more than that. I think I punched her, probably kicked her. I really don't remember any of it.
Jason obviously knows what happened from the trial, if not from his memory. Would you believe you if you were me?
I don't know. Probably not, but all I can do is tell the truth. I mean, I can't give you a different version.
The phone records show that he tormented, choked, and beat Danielle for at least an hour, so it's highly unlikely that his brain wouldn't have retained at least some fragmented memories from the assault. But at this point, it's clear he's not going to deviate from his story.
I can tell you what happened the next day. I wake up and I have all my clothes on. I go into the bedroom. She's unconscious on the floor.
Unconscious or dead?
Well, I guess dead, same.
Didn't you check?
I did check. Yeah, there was no pulse or anything.
Your memory must have been triggered when you saw her.
No, I checked the door to see if somebody broke in. I knew that we had some kind of physical altercation, and when I sat there and thought about it, like, who else could it have been? And then I took her to the bathtub, and then I turned on the cold water in the shower, tried to revive her. Nothing.
Then what did you feel at that moment?
What do you think I felt?
I think you felt panic.
Yeah. Panic. I didn't know how I was in this situation.
So what did you do?
So then, I sat there and I smoked a ton of weed. And then, I got bags to preserve her body.
Why?
To give myself time. To figure out whether I was going to kill myself, turn myself in, or run.
Damage control.
Mm-hmm.
Self-preservation.
Mm-hmm.
He packed her body in the bathtub, and he turned on a big fan that they had. He put it in the bathroom. He took all these steps that cover his tracks, and then he fled the apartment.
Jason was nowhere to be found. Jason Bourne was gone.
Jason Bourne claims not to remember any of the gory details of how he strangled and stomped his girlfriend, Danielle Thomas, to death. But he tells me he does remember cleaning up the crime scene and running away.
He had no idea what he was going to do. He was at his wit's end because he clearly didn't premeditatively plan this that day. He had no clear plan of escape.
Through my research, I know that after Jason fled, he sent several text messages from Danielle's phone to her friends to make them think she was okay. Tragically, Suzanne saw the text message first and didn't listen to Danielle's terrible voicemail from the night before until several days later. However, Jason also left a desperate voicemail for an ex-girlfriend, all but confessing to the grisly crime.
That's Jason. I'm in serious trouble. Jason and I went out together on Saturday night. We both were got intoxicated, had a disagreement, and I blacked out, and Danielle was dead.
On the run, Jason withdrew money from an ATM in Washington, D.C. and went to Chicago. From there, he emailed his mother for help. Your email struck me. It seemed remorseless. In that you say, I am in or will be in a lot of trouble. Not, Danny was dead. I must have killed Danny.
Yeah, I didn't want to. I wasn't in touch with reality yet.
And gave yourself an excuse. I haven't come to terms with these psychological issues from my childhood.
I mean, that's just the truth.
And then you write in this email, I need you to hire me an attorney. Do you think it's your mother's fault that you sit?
No, not at all.
Here.
Not at all. It's not her fault at all. I think it's more I wanted her to help me get out.
So it was just self-serving.
Yeah.
Jason tells me it's not his mother's fault, but that's exactly what it sounds like in this manipulative email. He blames and resents her for his terrible childhood, and now feels she owes it to him to get him out of this mess. Then on Tuesday, 2 days after killing Danielle, Jason does something odd. He calls the police, but he doesn't exactly confess.
He told the police they should go check on her because they got into a fight and she may need help or was unconscious. When he very well knew she was dead, of course.
This decision reveals the complex layers of Jason's personality. 1 minute, he's all about calculated self-preservation. The next minute, he shows elements of guilt. Just 2 weeks after his fateful warning to Danielle, Detective Dennis Frawley was called to the scene of the crime.
I walked up the stairs. The apartment was pristine clean. As I got closer to the bathroom, I heard a dog barking. The dog was protecting its owner. The body was in the bathtub. When I turned and I recognized who she was, on that side of the face, it looked as though she was kicked, with a foot. He killed her. I knew that right there and then.
Meanwhile, Jason returned to New York, where his mother arranged for him to meet with a lawyer. On Friday, June 29th, nearly a week after the murder, police tracked Jason down.
They had a tracker on his phone, and they traced him, found him in a restaurant. The officer walks right into Jason as Jason is coming back from the bathroom. So they basically collide with one another.
Have the right to an attorney. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court of law.
Jason was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He claimed that during the murder, he blacked out.
She came in and I was lying on the couch. I don't really remember anything after that.
His 7-week trial began in February 2014. Jason's mother paid for his lawyer, but never showed up in court. Jason's legal team presented an unusual defense. They admitted that he killed Danielle, but claimed that he suffers from a mental illness that stems from his mother abandoning him when he was a child. It's called intermittent explosive disorder, a rare condition in which a person is generally calm and rational until something triggers an out-of-control rage. Temporary blackouts can sometimes occur. Essentially, you're being told, you have this brain that doesn't work right. Do you buy that?
I feel like there's definitely something wrong with me.
As you know, there have been people with horrible backgrounds who don't become killers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not the doctor.
In court, Jason offered a tearful apology to Danielle's family.
Man, I don't know what to say. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. I don't know how to say it.
I can't know whether those tears were real or not, but I do think Jason may actually have intermittent explosive disorder. But here's the key. Since Jason already knew he had a problem with rage, he can't avoid responsibility for this crime.
This was a pattern throughout his life. This was not a one-off situation where he was just doing what Jason Bond does, which is abuse and torture the women who make the mistake of being with him.
The jury convicted 35-year-old Jason Bond of first-degree murder. He is sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars. Detective Frawley says Danielle's case affected him so deeply that he decided to retire from the police department after 31 years.
I couldn't bring her back. I couldn't make her better. I couldn't do a thing. Not a day goes by, I don't think about it. Not one day. I try to turn it into positive energy. If I hear or know of a domestic situation, get some help.
Danielle was the light of her family. They lived for this girl. To lose her is just tragic, and it's something that I don't think I'll ever recover from.
My goal today was to find out how someone who seemed to have it all could commit such a horrific murder. As I wrap up this interview, it's clear to me that Jason Bond never really had it all in the first place. Yes, he did pull himself together after a terrible childhood and find success, but ultimately he just couldn't escape his abusive background, his genetic makeup, and his pattern of violent behavior. He could have sought help. He didn't. And that's why he's behind prison walls, a place where he can never hurt innocent people again.